It was a warm early fall. We had two Brittany's at that time. And it was a classic father-son conversation. You're taking that sort of mid-morning break and we're having like the perfect whatever power bar and hydration drink, for ourselves. And my son kind of looks down at the dogs. It's a little weird, like all they're having is water. We are like totally dialed out to make sure that we can handle the next couple of hours. Why isn't there something better in a liquid form, in a hydration form? When you think about their genes, when you think about, how they synthesize proteins and get their bodies to work, how could we do something interesting, unique, different for dogs? We wanted to do hydration better through bone broth. And I really do think we could have the opportunity to supercharge that idea and dedicate true food scientists, research teams, veterinarians to help you make something different. Not to have something that was like artificially created with a bunch of active ingredients, but something that was like all natural, human grade, limited ingredients that is doing more than just providing electrolytes. It's sort of a full spectrum hydration at the bottom, then your proteins, then your fats, then your carbohydrates, then your electrolytes and minerals. And if you look at bone broth, it has every rung.
All right, everybody, welcome back to another episode of GDIY. I'm joined this time by Kevin Bauer. Kevin, how we doing today?
Nick, what's going on? It's been too long, been a minute, and super excited to be with you here today for sure.
Yeah, we've talked about doing this for a few months. We kind of linked up or at least met by extension through other people around Pheasant Fest time, and we just haven't really sat down to catch up and talk dogs and hunting season, and by extension, what you do with your company Furvor, of which we're obviously going to get into. But I want to know, you right before we hit play, you dropped on me that you just moved back to Idaho, and obviously I went to Idaho last year, and it's a pretty special place. So I need to hear a little bit more about what you have going on up in that area.
Yeah, we gosh, my in a blink of an eye, all those cliches that your parents talk about, I feel like as you get older are so true. And so a blink of an eye, my wife and I become empty nesters this fall. So two boys, my knuckleheads, my best friends. My younger guy goes off to college this fall. We've had this getaway place in southeastern Idaho. It's right outside of a small little town called Driggs, Idaho. Depending on what year was the last 15 years, we could be here a month, we could be here during the COVID days, a half a year or longer. And so starting this fall though, like we're going to be like really ramping it up, being here 6 months plus of the year. And so I couldn't be more excited. 4th of July here is like first day of summer. So it was interesting. Like literally a week ago, it was still snowing here. And then now it's 80 degrees. And so summer is a week away and we're excited to enjoy the summer.
Man, I was just talking to my buddy Scott up in Minnesota yesterday, and it never fails this time of year. You start talking weather, and he's like, man, it's gorgeous weather up here. And he told me that, it's starting in the 50s and, he's barely getting into the 70s, and it's just gorgeous. And I'm just sitting here, I'm like, yeah, we've been in the mid to high 90s for the past 2.5 weeks. And, for me to train dogs, I'm getting up at 5 a.m. to make that happen. So all of you enjoying, actual springtime weather for us during the summer months, I'm a little jealous, but then it's full circle. Come January, February, you guys are looking at us through a sheet of white and kind of envious of us down here. So, I mean, there's no perfect play. It's a balancing act, right?
Yes. You got to enjoy your winter sports to be up here, December through March, arguably, right? You got to like the white stuff for sure.
Yeah. Now remind me, I don't know if you mentioned that already, but where did you come from? Weren't you in like California or West Coast, somewhere in there?
Yeah, so I grew up on the East Coast. I'm a Marylander for all of those childhood days, but then I relocated to the West Coast, spent a decent amount of time in the Bay Area and San Francisco, and then now in northern San Diego for close to 20 years. And so I never would have sort of planned that or thought that, being a left coaster. It has worked out tremendously for my wife and I and our boys. But I tell you, like being up here in the mountains really quickly, this is the Teton Mountain Range. It is God's country. And this is where I see spending a lot of time going forward.
And I have to imagine that you moving back to Idaho once your boys are out of the house, I'm assuming your boys are hunters like you. So if I'm putting myself in their shoes, they're probably like, oh yeah, move to Idaho after we go to college, not before. Okay, that helps them out a lot. How envious are they of you up in being in Idaho with the season just 3 or 4 months away?
I've got a little bit of a yin and a yang, right? I've got one that's a little bit more my hunter. I've got the other that's a little bit more of my fisherman. But it doesn't matter, right? They both kind of gravitated to their outdoors love. And they're super excited that they know for like those mini breaks that they can get away for, like all this fall, which is my favorite time of year up here, basically September 1st, almost all the way to Thanksgiving. They know they can jump on a plane and they know where to find me and have a ton of fun. So
Mm,
and hopefully they'll be bringing guys from school and getting to expose them to something that they have never seen before.
right.
So I'm excited for that role. Like I grew up in a family with a dad and a grandpa that were outdoorsmen, but a lot of my background for like, and we'll talk a bunch about upland bird hunting, really came through one of my best friends' dads when I was in college.
Really?
And I
Okay.
think about like, yeah, like being able to have the chance to pay that back, right? Really opening up the eyes of kids that think they may have an interest in it and just sort of being that conduit for them.
Absolutely. So that's really interesting that you say that your dad and grandfather were both in the outdoors, but you still found the mentor, so to speak, in an outside influence. So it talks to me more about that because that's a common thing in the world that we're in is how do you get people involved? How do you get your kids involved? How do we
Right.
bring people into the sport, quote unquote, the correct way to where they're actually, good stewards of what we're actually out there to do? You know, talk to me about like the mentorship of how you found that and then it left a lasting impression with you to want to pay it forward to your boys and their friends.
Yeah, so I grew as I said, I grew up in Maryland. My grandfather was like the consummate Chesapeake Bay outdoorsman, like probably a heavier bias towards fishing. I mean, there wasn't a fish, a run that he was missing. I'd probably say, looking back on it, and the amount of fish that I cleaned for him with him. He was a big striper rockfish fan for those who are on the East Coast listening. But and he would travel obviously all across the Bay Area, but then big road trips. I mean, I remember growing up and all of a sudden he's saying like, "Hey, I'm taking a month and going to Mexico." So my grandfather, this is been ages ago, doing road trips just to kind of find, a fun, unique sort of fish that he wanted to chase south of the border. For my dad, and so he, did both bird hunting and fishing. And so my grandfather exposed me to bird hunting first. My dad gravitated more towards fishing than hunting. And so I didn't get as much exposure from my dad than my grandfather for the hunting. So it wasn't, I knew was enjoying, like I enjoyed those outings and just like how different it was than fishing. But my dad was always gravitating sort of to the father son trips, whether they were just the day, a couple days, the long weekend of different lakes, different streams, and all that kind of fun stuff. And so that taste or curiosity of wanting to go further into upland hunting, I mean, I was already hooked, no pun intended, on fishing. I will fish as much as I can out here in Idaho now, this summer and fall. But I was really curious about learning more about hunting. I could do that with my grandfather, but as he's getting older, it's getting a little bit tougher for him with
Hmm.
his health issues. And my best friend in college, TJ Daly, his dad, Tom Daly, if he ever hears this, um, again, another consummate Chesapeake Bay outdoorsman who his passion for hunting, all whether that was waterfowl or upland, in addition to fishing, I think just opened my eyes. And we'll talk about Brittany's. He was one of the first people I knew also that had Brittany's. He had variety of dogs, but
Mm.
that had Brittany's, and that like just to have someone that's so open to just to teach you everything and just the pleasure of like now if like you don't have to fish, you don't have to hunt, you're just watching that person that you're bringing into the sport. And now like I've done that a few times now, you get just as much satisfaction if not more, right,
Right.
than the guy holding the gun or the guy landing the fish.
Yeah.
And so that was the Daily family. And it kind of pushed me, I think, in my early 20s, a much more aggressive trajectory of, okay, I really love the outdoors, and let's go deep.
Yeah, yeah. So you didn't need any gasoline poured on the fire of the fishing, but he just kind of helped urge you, get you more in the wing shooting, kind of balance you out a little bit. I got to ask, being in the Maryland area back then, what was the upland opportunities like back then? Were we talking rough grouse? I'm assuming the bob whites were kind of hanging around. What were you guys primarily chasing back then?
Yeah, it was it's funny, it pivoted a little bit to grouse, but much more in waterfowl, which was so like I got my taste once again for upland, again chasing grouse. That went from Maryland to where my friend was and I were in college, which was Virginia and the Blue Ridge Mountain Range, which was much better habitat than for grouse in that region. But so Maryland, Virginia, Chesapeake Bay, that flyway, right? That corridor for waterfowl also gave me a great exposure for that as well. I just enjoyed, to be honest, like anytime I'm invited to do some waterfowl hunting, I'm going.
Yeah.
But I enjoy that, behind the dogs, chasing the dogs, the long hikes, the teamwork that it takes to get it right. And so, whether it's sort of climbing that sort of rolling hills in the Blue Ridge Mountain Range, it was a great half day hike, and you were lucky enough maybe to pull the trigger once, or you're on a couple of coveys and you're really into it. Like I love experiencing the outdoors in that fashion with dogs and birds being part of it.
Mm. And so you kind of got hooked on the waterfowl, but I'm with you. I'm more of an opportunistic duck hunter. I'll do a couple a year, but it's kind of what initially got me into wing shooting years ago. But fast forward, I learned, through the dogs, not having to put waders on, not having to wake up at 3 a.m. to fight your way to a public land blind, what have you. And just, I'm going to be honest, I just like getting out and walking and exploring and seeing new things with the dogs, and you don't really get that aspect with the waterfowl. I mean, you can if you want to go jump shoot or you do a lot of scouting, but for the most part, like I just enjoyed and appreciated the simplicity of upland hunting, of just park the truck, grab your shotgun and go for a walk. And then duck hunting, it's really cold, it's really wet, and it's really early, and you're carrying a bunch of decoys and a whole lot of other mess. And I mean, it gets more expensive. Upland, it's like, man, you don't even need a vest. You can just take a backpack or something like that. Like it's just like if you want to go, just go.
Yeah.
But man, I also tell everybody, when you are on a really good duck hunt, when they're cupped up and you're hearing wings whistling over you before the sun even comes
Yeah.
up, there's
It's
nothing more fun than a good duck hunt.
yeah, it's hard to compare it with anything, right?
Right. So tell me where the Brittany's came in from. You got introduced to it and everything. Why the Brittany's? You said that you had an influence in on that, but
Yeah.
fast forward to today, you're still running Brittany. So like, what was it about the Brittany that spoke to you?
Yeah, so probably just another mentor, like another mentor I had, probably mid to late 20s when I was working in New York City, was my next exposure to Brittany's, and he was much more of an upland hunter, and kind of home base for him where he was doing a lot of work was Montana, with his dogs. And so I lucked out again. I lucked out again having a mentor and a job in New York City where this guy was willing to fly me out. I mean, not for free, but was willing to have me kind of go out with him in Montana and his friends to really, I think, learn what I do now. Right. So I'm doing most of my hunting out here in Idaho, which is in some degree similar to what that was like when I was learning in my late 20s. Again, they had a variety of dogs, but at that time he had a couple of Brittany's, and I again just enjoyed it. And I think until I started getting my own Brittany's, I had a bunch of exposure to them again out here in Idaho in the early years before so that's close to 15 years ago before I decided to get um, my own little mini family of them. And again, we all have our favorites. We have our breeds. I think for the type of hunting that I'm doing here in Southeast Idaho, they're a perfect match for me. And I'll just kind of say it at that, right? So I
Right.
think we all have our preferences, but whether I'm chasing some birds, some mountain grouse, the cover isn't as bad or as that thick that, the Britneys, which again, just they don't get beat up that much, if that makes sense, where you would be thinking about, why don't I have a GSP?
Right.
They can handle the mountain grouse hunting, and then they flourish. And when we're doing sort of those zones, which are part ag, part the untouched sort of rolling ag areas that are like abutting the far, like they just do a great job. And I don't need them ranging. They're close holding, which is the reality. I need more close holding than long ranging. And they've just been perfect for me and my boys.
Yeah. And I'm assuming we're talking American Brittany's, or are we talking French?
So going right to the love of the debate. So
Right.
and you can't say French. What are you doing? So yeah.
Epignon Breton. Sorry, my bad.
I don't want you getting any hate mail.
Hey, sometimes we just got to bring a little class into the podcast, right? Like I like to keep things at a base level, but you know what? If we got to be fancy, Epignon
that
Breton, all right?
that was perfect. Your French teacher in high school would love that.
Anything outside of dogs, to go somewhere else.
I've had one American and two French.
Okay, so you have a little bit of experience in both.
Yeah, I'm happy to roll up the sleeves and go deep on both of those. And so I've enjoyed them, right? Enjoyed them all, and it would be a flip of a coin for my next one if I would do the EB or American the next time around.
Now, I mean, as far as color scheme on the French Brittany's, are you still a purist in the orange and white, or did you mix in a little Tickin or some black? What are we talking about here?
I'm a renegade. I'm a rogue. I'm a roan guy only. I don't like the perfect white, the perfect liver spots. I like messy roans. Both, but all three of mine actually. And so that's just me.
Yeah, I guarantee you had some EB purists, patting you on the back by extension. Then they just heard that and they just threw something at the radio. So
yeah.
But I mean, the French Brittany's EBs, like it is funny. Like if you look at them, to your point, somebody at first glance, they might be like, man, they're going to get beat up. They're too soft, especially if you get that just like really small, cute looking Brittany. But to your point, they hold up a lot better than what you might think hitting the cover and brush. When you see them out there doing their thing in the right cover and habitat, it's pretty eye opening to realize that, EBs, they're the smallest pointing breed out there. And so you go put that down there on the ground, and the way they cover ground and everything, like it's just infectious. It's just, they may not cover the ground nearly as fast as the bigger leg dogs by any means, but their level of enthusiasm and work ethic, it's just, I love watching them work. They just have a certain energy or level to them that some other breeds don't.
Ditto, right? I'm a fan. So I love just and I know a lot of breeds are like this. Around the house, they've been a fantastic family companion. I don't even like the process of putting a collar on him, getting him ready for the field. I mean, he just knows it's go time. And it's almost like literally I have two different dogs. And just like he is, again, my current one, who's Oakley, who is an EB. He's been a fantastic companion. So, and just crazy stories. It's like he's the devil in the field. You'll he just turned 3, so he's still learning, right? He's still kind of pushing through the strokes a little bit. But the alpha side of him, it's just so funny to watch when he's in the field and not as much at all, right, around the house. And he had his first skunk encounter.
How'd that
go? Oh my God.
Bring the story. We've all been there. Tell me the story.
Right. Like all the like special skills you think you have, right, as that relationship with him, and all the commands and getting it right. And nothing goes right. He was so locked on. Thankfully, it was more of a juvenile, but so locked on and just been like, hey, listen, I'm going to have to kill this thing. Don't take it personal. And it doesn't matter any type of instruction or motivation you're giving me, like I'm gonna come back over there in a second, but I'm just gonna have to kill it. Okay.
Mm.
So like just like
And
give me my space for 30 seconds and then I'll be right back.
and so
And
you told me this was a French Brittany, not a German Brittany.
that's
So what, did he get a glancing shot? Did he hand deliver it? To give me
oh.
the actual backstory. What happened?
Yeah, so he did the whole roll and tumble, and again, it was a juvenile, and was so happy that he could deliver it as a trophy
Mm,
to me, which
yeah.
I hadn't seen him do something like that with I'll just say like this category of rodents or right or and I know that's not the right thing to say for what a skunk is, but um and so he was just painted yellow essentially, the all
Mm.
from his face, mane down, painted yellow.
So he made it count then.
He's like, I'm all in, and we're gonna figure out how to get through this afterwards.
Did
And
did you
so
do the did you do the typical mixture, Dawn dish soap, baking soda, and
oh
hydrogen peroxide? What did you do? Did you go hand them off to a
yeah, so
groomer or what?
the so the complete like and I forget what brand it was because I was doing it with a friend of mine that literally lived right up the road and is much more deep in experience for dealing with skunks. And so like this coat of like an over-the-counter soap that like it was blue, right? I'll say Dawn blue or Dawn green, right? So like
Yeah.
the perfect coat of soap is step one. And then and really kind of working that in before we'd washed off, never the water beforehand. So that was
Yeah.
step. And then we did use over the counter, and I don't know if it's shot out or if it's the actual name of the brand, but like a skunk off or something like that. And it actually worked really pretty effectively. And we kind of just ping ponged back and forth between that. We didn't do the hydrogen peroxide, which I know is out there as well.
Yeah. What about the gear? I mean, man, the collars and the gear, that's always, it's amazing to some people with their first skunk experience. How, how
You're
it
just
just,
like
it's,
it's plastic. How is this collar retaining the
yes.
smell?
Yeah. It's just like, and then you think like, oh, I'll just go wash this off. I'll use dish soap. I'll go soak it in some dishwater or something for a while. And it's just like, I've gotten to where, man, if you're wearing a tracking collar, just take the housing off of it and throw the plastic thing away and order you a new one. To me, it's not even worth the 20 or 30 bucks to try and salvage if it's gotten a
Uh,
good shot from a skunk.
It's a good reminder. I mean, one of my good friends out here, who I do a lot of my hunting with, it was his turn to drive that day. And so like kind of have communal kennels a little bit between the two of us. And he runs really small labs. And and I'm looking at him and I'm just like that kennel, we're throwing it out, right? And I still to this day I haven't kind of got him that new kennel, which I need to before the season starts, before we start going out together. But like he couldn't be in that. It's fine. It'll be fine. Trust me. I'll keep it out in the sun for a little. Be fine. Like it's not fine.
It still smells to this day. It's amazing how long it
Yeah.
lasts, and then especially if the dog gets it in their mouth, you're smelling it on their breath for like 2 months
Uh,
afterwards. Like it's not as severe as at first, obviously, but every now and then the dog will just walk by you and cough or something. You get that whiff of the skunk all over again. It's like that was 2 months ago. Like how is this still there? But yeah, it is what it is. Um, we can keep talking about skunks if you'd like, but I would really like to start kind of getting into your business, your Furvor, and the bone broth and the supplements and everything that you're doing. I want to hear the backstory to begin with. Is like this is a world that you appreciate, you love, you have your Brittany's, you enjoy the outdoors, you enjoy the hunting. Mixing business with pleasure can kind of be hit or miss for some people. So,
yeah.
what sparked the idea? What made you want to come to market with a product, especially something in the food supplement industry?
Yeah. So it is my first time for sure in pet nutrition and in the consumer packaged good industry. So I am at times I do feel what day or week it is, and you and I've laughed about this. I am reinventing the wheel from time to time and running through a few walls that probably I shouldn't be, but having a blast, right? So the last 18 months has gone by so fast since we launched, but maybe rewind to close to 3 years ago. So of those two sons, I jokingly call them my knuckleheads. Um, out on a classic early fall, which was the Indian summer, right? It was a warm early fall um, hunt. We're out as early as we can with our dogs. We had two Brittany's at that time, and and it was a classic like father son conversation. You're taking that sort of mid morning break, and just like any topics being discussed, right? It's not just all about hunting, and we're having like the perfect whatever power bar and hydration drink, for ourselves. And my son kind of looks down at the dogs and just like, isn't it a little weird? Like all they're having is water, and like we are like totally dialed out to make sure that we can handle the next couple of hours. And why isn't there something better in a liquid form, in a hydration form, but lack of a better term, like Gatorade for dogs when you're kind of pushing them pretty hard, for working dogs. And that conversation, which was just between Carson and me, led to just, hey, like let's have fun with this. It was a great father and son idea. Is there something really there? Again, being around dogs, thinking about hydration in different ways. We've seen, as you know, we've seen different forms of liquids, gels, powders come and go in the pet sector. Gosh, a couple of decades now, right? And so why is nothing stuck? And so spending some time kind of thinking through that. And so hydration and hydration performance meant a lot to me at the same time, Nick. Like I hit maybe my midlife crisis early 40s. So like early 40 to mid 40s, I decided to get off the couch a little bit more, like get really back into shape, and have worked my way up all the way to Ironman distance triathlons. And so like I was like really focused in on all kinds of nutrition, just on understanding how it's impacting your performance, just how you're feeling during the day, like all the wearables you could wear for watches and bands, and understanding what your VO2 max, what it means and why it's important. Like I was really dialing into that, to compete at that level. And so I thought it was bizarre knowing like how close cousins dogs are to us when you think about their genes, when you think about sort of like, their, how they synthesize proteins and get their bodies to work, why there hasn't been stuff that has stuck to the market. And so this idea that Carson and I were having in the field is also like kind of piquing my interest from like this 5-year run, no pun intended, of like really understanding my body better. And hey, how could we do something interesting, unique, different for dogs? And this idea for journey, this idea for Furvor, it ultimately came to this like sort of swim lane of, we wanted to do hydration better through bone broth. And we can kind of get into more of that later. But like Carson and I were really spending time in our kitchen and our garage, different places. And I'm married for 25 years, but I thought at some point I was starting to risk that based on just having fun, cooking things up and trying to make it better than what you could buy in store. And I think any startup, like you talk to founders, entrepreneurs, every startup needs a little bit of luck, and people just define luck differently. And for me was the company that I was running at this time. One of our largest clients is a 100-year-old multi-billion-dollar company. It's a world leader in amino acids and proteins, and we'll talk probably about that a lot more on the talk. And the gentleman that was running the Americas let me know, hey, like we actually bought a bone broth plant in Ohio, and I know what you're doing with Carson, and I really do think we could have the opportunity to supercharge that idea and dedicate true food scientists, research teams, veterinarians to help you make something different for the pet sector. And so having the ability to tag onto that group for 12 months really accelerated this concept. And arguably we wouldn't have been able to create a first of a kind product without their help. Like at some point, right, would have been divorced, or what we were doing in the garage would have limited out. And
Right.
so that helped us a ton to get to market faster with something that's never been created before.
It's always interesting when you set out to do something or try something new, just change things up, how there are sometimes such things as a guy that just happened to have access to this bone broth facility makes itself known. And it's kind of like, never in a million years would I have been able to find that if I was even seeking it out? It just happened upon me. Because I was
Yeah.
about to ask, like, why bone broth? Was there any consideration of doing something? You mentioned Gatorade for us earlier. Like, was there consideration of trying something just of like a simple electrolyte water for the dogs or something like that? But then obviously, just an opportunity comes with bone broth, and bone broth, the electrolytes, essentially for anybody listening, this electrolytes, it's essentially salt. I mean, there's a number of different electrolytes, but it's essentially for just to kind of keep it grounded, we're talking salt. So obviously, you go the bone broth route. All those electrolytes are still in the bone broth, but it's also giving you added protein and calories and really kind of recharges much more than just keeping them hydrated. So like when we first talked, you were telling me that you had a hydration tool, but when I started talking, I'm like, this is kind of even more than a hydration tool.
Yeah, it's food in liquid form. I mean, you nailed it, right? And so I need to always be careful when I'm saying I think I can start the conversation with people around this premise of like, have you thought about Gatorade for dogs? Because it gets people in the mindset of starting to have a conversation. But I mean, you're absolutely right. When again, bone broth has been around forever, especially for people. I do need to admit, right? Having lived in California for 20 years, I do have a little bit of the crazy Californian in me. You can go to a coffee bar in California and order bone broth as a tea
Really?
still. And
Okay.
that was happening probably 5 to 10 years ago of just like this all natural elixir, great for proteins and collagen. Let's simplify it. I want to go to potentially just a coffee shop and have some of grandmom's bone broth and
Yeah.
sip on it. I'm not feeling well, or if it just wants to make my system feel better. And so that's been on the West Coast for a while. And so um, when we started thinking about the idea before our partner really came into the picture, I mean, not to have something that was like artificially created with a bunch of active ingredients, but something that was like all natural, human grade, limited ingredients that, to your point, is doing more than just providing electrolytes. It's sort of a full spectrum. If you looked at the food pyramid for dogs, right? It's hydration at the bottom, then your proteins, then your fats, then your carbohydrates, then your electrolytes and minerals. And if you look at bone broth, it has every rung of the food
Right.
pyramid. I think is a great way to look at it.
There's a reason, we can talk about California being California. I think anybody listening to this on either side of the spectrum can recognize the uniqueness of California. We'll just leave it at that. But what we can't leave bone broth, there's a reason why it caught on out there and so many other places. This is something when I kind of came into the hunting space, and especially whitetail hunting, me and my wife and my family, we have come to appreciate the bone broth from providing our own food through hunting than anything else. You can stack up all these recipes, you can stack up all the meat and you can grill it. Don't get me wrong, I'm a meat eater. Like I love all that stuff. But the bone broth, we have realized in our household the value of bone broth just from a standpoint of what you just described, that like if you start feeling a little unwell and you go and you make your own DIY homemade bone broth and you kick back a bowl of that, just drinking it as soup, throwing some dumplings in there, what have you, there's a million, just drinking it, it knocks it out immediately. I mean, my wife's favorite recipe comes from a roasted maple smoked duck that I do, and then we take the carcass and we make a bone broth out of it. But then the first thing that we do with the deer, when I shoot a deer, she's asking, when are you making bone broth? Because we've been out since the last time, right?
That's really
And
cool.
there's so much value in bone broth, and anybody that's tried it, like there, I mean, yeah, you can sit here and say like, I don't know for sure what it's doing for me, but I tell everybody, like, if you take it, every time you take it, if you notice that you feel better afterwards, like there's meaning behind that. At some point, anecdotal evidence does account for something, and that's why when we were talking and you initially said a hydration supplement, I'm like, okay, you have my interest. But when you mentioned it was bone broth, you really had my attention. But then when you said it was also human grade, you really had my attention, because very often I'm in camp. We're camping out in the middle of wherever, upland hunting, and we're
Yeah.
cooking dinner, and I can just take the bone broth and it's good for me and the dogs, and it's in a convenient little squeeze. Like you can throw it in your cooler, so it's like whether you're using it for your dogs or not, it can also
Yeah.
help you in camp when you're making dinner with your buddies as well.
Yeah. Yeah. Listen, I mean, people think I'm crazy, right? But I keep reminding them it is human grade. It is the only product coming out of this facility. Sorry, there's my Oakley.
Uh-oh.
The 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 only product coming out of that facility that gets diverted from its human grade and it should be going to the human aisle in your grocery store or wherever to the pet food aisle, right? So it is when they see me dilute my product, as you know, which is one of the cool things with it, you get to dial up or dial down, like how concentrated you want to have it. So I'll drink it all the time as a tea in the morning. I'll do these little videos with my dogs as they're having breakfast. Just like, oh my gosh, like, what are you doing? Like, did you ever grow up in a household where your mom made you chicken noodle soup? I mean,
Right.
all you're having is the broth from chicken noodle soup. So obviously we are believers, right? We've been using bone broth in our own household for health and to your exactly how you described when you guys are using it typically. And I've really tried to simplify the message to dog owners, to pet parents, especially to upland bird hunters. Like you're using it from your hunts, and so like we're extracting in on this industrial scale, like we'll use pressure cooking kettles, right? Which they all start at this. You got to start with bones, right? The bone marrow. So as to say, it's the beef marrow bone. And so all we're doing is extracting like why dogs in the first place want to get to the inside of those bones, right? They're chewing bones not just for the fun and stimulation. Like they want to get to the marrow because it's one of the densest parts on that entire body frame of an animal that from the old days, if they were wolves, that they were able to take down and get to that protein rich marrow. And so like in bone broth, it's that unique process of being able to extract that marrow out. And arguably you're just creating it into a liquid form through a really slow cooking and kettle process that like to me like helps people start to connect the dots of just like okay like what is bone broth and then I think another light bulb that goes on for dog owners, especially dog owners that are getting more and more into nutrition is because it's so protein rich, we know that dogs have their 10 essential amino acids. And so this stuff is just loaded with them, right? Because amino acids are the building blocks of proteins. You can't have proteins without the amino acids. And so like, sometimes I know I've joked with you in the past, I feel like a little bit of a snake oil salesman for like what bone broth can do for your pup. But like since it has this entire profile of their essential amino acids, it is helping them in so many ways for the performance dog owner, dogs in service dog owner. I think they really see it manifesting right in that sort of muscle mobility areas because it's just reminding their bodies to keep like helping with protein synthesis and making sure that the muscles and mobility, aspects of their frame are doing what they're supposed to be doing. But there's in so many different ways, which I think is interesting. I'll get comments about like seeing it outwardly. Hey, I wonder what it's doing inside for my dog, right?
Yeah.
Because they finally get now, to your point, it's this supplement source. It's not just simply giving them a replacement for water.
Right. And so many of those terms people have probably heard it some way somewhere, a biology class being sold a supplement for ourselves. I mean, you talk amino acids and protein. I mean, essentially when we go work out, which a dog hunting is working out, when we are doing that, we're essentially tearing the striations in our muscles and then we have to rebuild them back. So if they are getting in time hydration in the field, because you can literally dilute this in your water bottle, in your vest as you're walking through, as the dog is naturally getting muscle fatigue, you're already ahead of the curve, giving them some essential, I mean, just you're giving them the tools for their muscles to start the healing process before the workout's even done, right? And then the protein on top of that really helps the healing process. But then we also just in this space we hear all the time about some people have dogs that have trouble eating when on the road, or when they hunt. This is, I fall in this camp. When I go hunt hard, Rachel specifically, my short hair, she prioritizes sleep more so than even food. She will forego
Right.
food to
Yeah.
go sleep and rest and recover. So when you have something like this, that it's enticing. I mean, you sent me a bottle of it. I used it with my own dogs. Dogs are dogs. You give them any bit of flavor, in addition to their kibble or whatnot, they're gonna kill it, and they really enjoyed it. But if you have that little topper that you can throw on top of their food, or mix in the water bath that you put the food in, it's going to help some of those pickier eaters uh, eat the food that you need them to. Because if you're on a week, 2 week long trip, it's important that the dogs are getting these nutrients. And anything that kind of helps me kickstart the healing process for my dogs and the recovery process, so we can go hunt again tomorrow, I'm all ears. Because that goes a long way. When you only have a week long to hunt, you want to get every mile out of your dog that you effectively can.
I mean, again, like it framed it so well. I mean, I have two camps of, I'd say, active dog owners that you just like. Some people just talk about all the uniquenesses of when and why their dogs go on hunger strikes, and whether they last for, it's the first day of the 3-day trip, or whether it's just like that unique, 3-day weekend, like midway through the season, and just making sure that they're getting nutrition in their dogs, and for whatever that reason is, that they may just turn off from food from time to time. And so just a loyal following of folks that are sort of mixing it up at mealtime. And then, what I've loved chatting with you about, and you fall in this group, and other like breeders, trainers, right? Just pet parents that are in the field a lot. I'm gonna, fingers crossed, have an opportunity to even do some testing and trials with University of Alaska Fairbanks this fall. But it's testing the concept of, and I'll be first to admit, it's Furvor, or any, I'll say this, not just Furvor and what bone broth can do for you, any hydration supplement, thinking that it's a silver bullet for your dog when they're in the field, and when they've gone a pass of being dehydrated, and the risk of overexertion. There is no silver bullet. And like, in our product is not trying to say that by any stretch of the imagination. But I do think proper hydration before your dogs are hitting the field. And so one, and then again, back to my Ironman days. If you can never catch up once you're behind the curve, and I've chatted about that.
Yeah.
So like, you gotta have your dogs hydrated based on your own experiences, and get guidance from breeders and trainers and other professionals around you to get your pups hydrated before they're getting in the field or that training. And you can get more and more knowledgeable about that, what that means. Every dog's different. And then in the field, which I'd love having this debate with folks. Like, people are saying you never need to be thinking about mixing up hydration in the field. Like, so for me, right? Like, I'm just a case study of one. Like, I'm not generally like, if I'm around here and I know I'm going after sharptails, I know I'm just not going out for an hour or two. I've got one dog. I don't have three right now. It is a full day event. And so, like, that's an endurance event, right? Like, that's not a sprint. And so in that endurance event, I want to have the opportunity to give him different types of hydration supplements, right? Nutrients during that day. And so when I'm taking breaks, I want him to have the same benefit. And then I can think I've got this huge community, and you're kind of talking about this, like the post workout, that are really, measuring and giving me feedback and what they're seeing, which is like, again, all the science, we're close cousins to dogs, of getting nutrients in your body within 30 minutes to an hour after workout, and bioavailable, like really easy, right? So in hydration form is like a big asterisk there. And so, like, so being able, like, they're at the truck, right? Or they're at that midway spot, like you're not waiting for hours until mealtime that night, and being able to get them a really cool nutritional supplement in hydration form immediately within 30 minutes. And a lot of, I think, our early community and following 18 months into this, like, believing like that's just been so important, just that post exercise recovery workout, hydrating, but all the nutrients, like getting them ready for that next day. And as you know, like, there's many days of the season.
Yeah. Yeah.
So
That window, it's funny, we have that same window. I don't think a lot of people understand that if in high exertion periods you go work out, you go lift some weights. I'm not going to say that a protein shake with some amino acids or creatine or something doesn't help you if you take it 2 hours post workout, but to really get the most effective bang for your buck and the most benefits from it, you have that little 30-minute glycemic window. And
Yeah.
dogs have the same thing. And so it's really interesting that some people will say that dogs don't require additional anything in their water. Okay, well, I don't think that they necessarily require it. I would say that we don't require it either. But us as, I'm kind of a long distance runner. I enjoy my long distance run. I'm not a triathlon by any means or an Ironman, but I enjoy the long runs. And so when you do these long runs that, people go and spend a lot of money on these gel packs and these go packs and salt water
Right.
and all these other things that they are consuming through the process of the race.
Right.
I was just in Memphis for a little family gathering this past weekend, and me and my brother, we went out and we did a 10-mile run.
Yeah.
Well, it was 80 degrees when we woke up and got out there. Like it was muggy and it was humid, and throughout that run we sweat, we replace that with electrolyte drinks. Now the dogs don't, they still sweat, but they don't sweat like us. And I don't think a lot of people understand that when you sweat, you're losing these electrolytes, you're losing these minerals, and you have
Yeah.
to replenish them. And flat water just doesn't do it. Honestly, if you actually go and you drink nothing but regular water in the same ratio that you're losing it, you're actually flushing your system out of all the electrolytes, and you're actually going to dehydrate yourself even faster. And that's why it's so important to recognize that, like, if we're looking at it as an actual hydration tool, that regular water does not hydrate as well as added electrolytes in either human or dog.
Yeah. Again, I think you do such a beautiful job just simplifying
I'm
it,
trying
right?
not to put
So
words in your mouth, but every
yeah,
time you say something, I'm like, oh, well, this is an easy correlation because I mean, this
yeah,
long run that I did with my brother, we got halfway through it. I'm sweating, and I usually don't take anything on these long runs, like a half marathon, around 12,
yeah.
13 miles, I might take something. But this time I got like 6, 7 miles in, and I was hitting that wall and I was fading. And he had some Gatorade and he threw it to me, and it's just, I mean, you can feel your battery just upcharge as soon as you intake some of those electrolytes. And dogs are the
Yeah.
same way.
I mean, again, I don't have all the studies and reports that I used to really kind of dig into, but I mean, all right. So the wrong nutrition or not the right nutrition as an active person, like this picking like a low end of the spectrum, at least a 20% difference in what your performance or output's going to be, during that event. So just like trust me, there's a lot of research out there that you can find to support that. I think about just like how my body felt differently over like my 5 to 7 year like run of like doing those like larger distance triathlons. So I could see in my 40s how I was changing. I think about, yeah, again, if we use the dog, right, dog years equivalent to people,
Right.
right? And so people are always saying, so I'm like finally, like the dog, my dog's in its prime, he's a 5 year old, right? And so, um, again, you know, they're not 18. They're in their 30s, 40s, if not early 50s. And just like anything that you can give them, thinking about it that way, that you would want for your 40 or 50-year-old body, as you start feeling how hard it is to keep performing at that level and wake up the next day to do your 10 miler, maybe if you had a back-to-back 10 miler race, like your body's asking for more help, please. And so, assuming season after season, those dogs, right, they're not just aging like a year to year, right? I think it's good for as people start thinking about the equivalent. Like how do we help that, 30, 40, 50-year-old dog as he's being asked to do a lot in that given season or trial or, competition?
Yeah. No, absolutely. When you mentioned studies and research and stuff like that, when there's fewer things in the dog space as a whole that's going to evoke certain opinions and debates and viewpoints from everybody, such as dog nutrition. If you don't believe me, go search any dog Facebook group, and it's like every week there's an argument over
Right.
dog food, what be it
Right.
brands, the type, kibble, wet, raw. Like it's never ending. And
Right.
so a lot of people are like, well, who do I trust? What do I trust? What do I need? What's a luxury that if I can't afford it, everybody wants to do right by their dog. The question becomes, well, what is right for your dog? And so when we're talking about a new item such as this, and it's not really new, it is bone broth. Like, take that just, it is commercial grade bone broth. But I'm curious, have there been any studies or reports that, you guys have gotten involved in, or maybe they're pending? Talk to me about the actual science behind it. Cause like you said, it's one thing to come on here and be like, it's great for your dog, but it's another to actually have the results on a piece of paper to prove that.
Yeah. Look, we know how important that is. And so as a startup, we're willing to spend the dollars, I think, in time to work with the right organizations and groups that we think are experts in this space to help frame some of those results, right? So you can see some of the cause and benefits. So, and again, I sort of mentioned earlier, we've reached out. I've reached out. I've had some initial really positive conversations with the veterinarian program based out of University of Alaska, Fairbanks, and like they hold access to like the holy grail of performance dogs, right? They have access to just an enormous community of the dog sledding happening here in the States. And with that, they are able to put through tests on different products, different ideas, to really see what's happening sort of in an accelerated rate when dogs are being pushed to their ultimate level. If all that goes well, we'll do some of our initial studies starting this fall, winter time through that university. We, completely coincidentally, we have an ex Iditarod dog sled professional that's been residing in Jackson, Wyoming, which is just about an hour from where our house is here in Idaho. He and his team, he has a professional team still that he sponsors, as well as teams that he does sort of tourist oriented dog sledding in and around Jackson. He has about 150 dog kennel. They used our product for 6 months and truly tried to measure as best they could cause and benefit and as using it as a supplement with their teams. And his takeaway by the end of that was they were putting our smaller bottles in their vet race packs for any of their professional races and for this past season. And and maybe that's a good say. And so why? So at that level and for dogs, I think it translates to just the pet owners. You as you kind of think about if you're like me, walking with your dog in the field and you're thinking about are they pushing, are they exerting to themselves too much? Um, Frank Teasley, who runs Jackson Hole Iditarod and who's become a good friend of mine now, he said it's really interesting to me. So you've created an off the shelf concept of a bait bowl. And bait bowls and dog sledding have existed since the early days of Inuits started using dogs to get from town A to town B. And so they would never care if their dog went on a 1 day hunger strike, but they would care if they're not drinking. If they didn't have hydration to kind of get, through that sledding event, there's a chance that their dogs literally wouldn't make it to the next town. They can survive if they decided to go on that short hunger strike, but they need hydration to truly to be active and performing at that level. And so, what were bait bowls? Bait bowls in those days were like what you were talking about. Like, what was the kill? Right? Was caribou and their scraps left over, and they throw that in? They kind of make some type of again the caribou bone broth. Is it salmon heads from the smoke shack or just the fresh salmon that came in from that harvest? And so they're throwing anything in this concoction to know that the dogs, once they start drinking that bowl of water, it's going to the bottom. And so what they also didn't know, right, 1,000 years ago, was all the stuff that's in that water other than flavor. And so that concept of bait bowls in professional dog sledding has stuck. And so mostly those professional racers will have their own concoction of what that is. They're all creating their own home brew variety of, I'll call it broadly defined bone broth, but may be other active added supplements on top of it because they want to make sure before race time that they are hydrated properly and they're getting more than just water from it.
Yeah.
So, so I don't know where I kind of forget where I was going with that, but so that concept of just like why bone broth maybe as a premise, like why is it even valid? Like we can kind of go back to the earliest days of performance dogs, thinking about the importance of hydration and what varieties of bone broth could do for their bodies. And that concept of bone broth has maintained and stayed its place in highly competitive professional dog sledding even to today, 2024. And so what all we're saying is, hey, like we think that we can create this off-the-shelf product, give it as an alternative to pet parents that again may just be looking to do something different in that normal regimen and they don't have active sporting dogs, or like this audience thinking about what they could be doing differently other than mealtime to give their dogs an advantage in that given day or a given season of when they're pushing them really pretty hard.
Yeah. What would you say to the person that you just talked about, doing something in addition to just mealtime? Well, what do you say to people that say like, well, I feed a well-known brand of dog food. It's worked well for me. They recovered just fine. Why would I need to add bone broth to it or dilute it into it or add it into the bottle while out in the field? If my nutrition and dog food kibble does the trick and it gives them everything that they quote unquote need, why would I even consider doing a supplement of some sort?
Yeah. I listen, I started off on um I mean, did it end when I was in high school? And I don't know how many decades ago that was. Like this concept of like you were fine the next day for the basketball game if you just had the bowl of spaghetti. I mean, listen, that's died decades ago. If you think about professional sports and athletes, do you hear more about sort of like a brand of food that they're eating as a regimen during the season or the night before, or do you hear about all the innovation around hydration, delivering right nutrients on top of hydration, as they're again preseason or pre-training, training during the season, after, right? Like what is on the court or the game of field, right? It's about hydration. And so this concept that for the dogs, their system, um, that they can simply just be fine if you're giving them the right amount of food at mealtime. Um, I think that we can do better. It's 2024, and we can be thinking a little bit. Um, Again, if you believe in the premise that their system, ecos, like their bodies are a close cousin to ours, which all the research would support. Um, why not try something that is more than likely going to be additive? It's going to be supplemental. In no way will it be a detriment. And start stepping into this conversation of there's more, right? The bottom rung of the dog's food pyramid is hydration. It starts there. Protein is the next rung up. So if we know that that's the most important nutrient, sort of rung of their ladder, why not pause and think about how we can do that a little bit better to their benefit?
Right. And I think you kind of highlighted it, so I want to piggyback on it. Supplementation, it's not replacement, right? You're not replacing dog food, you're supplementing, and look at it, instead of it being an additive, look at it as it fills the voids. It's the same way with us. We can have a balanced diet, but you know what? Maybe we didn't get enough of a certain nutrient or mineral that we should. Therefore, a multivitamin helps us out, kind of fill the gaps. And it's the same thing, if you're an athlete or performance of some sort, adding in the protein, adding in the amino acids, adding in all of that stuff. There's a reason why professional athletes have done that for generations. At best it help, or at worst it just helps you recover a little bit faster, and at best it completely has your entire system operate more efficiently, right?
Yeah.
That's the easiest way. So when we talk about adding this, the back to the food, feeding these dogs a very high quality kibble, that's not always the most affordable option for a lot of people. So when we start talking about adding other things, adding supplements, what kind of price range are we talking about for this product?
Yeah, so we we really have kind of focused on making sure that like per serving, and I'd say most of your typical like hunting dogs are going to be around just a tablespoon of our product. Like it is so super concentrated, like in that tablespoon, again, plus or minus will be an average serving size. And so that turns out, again, depending on what bottle and maybe what time of year for promotions, like trying to keep that between 75 and 85 cents per serving. Um, and I'd say again, like depending on what the community member I'm talking to, they may be that sprucing up mealtime, right? Because again, for whatever reason, that dog is just maybe not as focused on mealtime. And I'd say when they're doing it at mealtime, there might be a little bit of a bend towards I know like I know that this like kibble or whatever food is in that in that bowl is doing the right thing for my dog, but there obviously has been a little bit of a trend, I'd say, over the last decade, adding some moisture at mealtime. Again, I know a lot of debate around sort of what that means and how much and how to be careful with it, but we do have a big audience that's, I would say, not necessarily floating their kibble, but thinking about how to add moisture at mealtime with kibble or other dehydrated dry foods. And so taking ours, you dilute it a little bit, you add a little bit more like that gravy. It's not like a traditional bone broth, but it dilutes out, looking a little bit darker like a gravy, and mixing that into the kibble. And it's just an appetite stimulant. And so we just see happy dog owners and dogs at mealtime, making sure that full meal's being clean plate club.
Right.
And then I'd say it's similar, right? And then the other group is diluting it. Again, every dog a little bit preference, and the uniqueness with our product, it squirts out, right? It's that barbecue sauce looking, it's a caramel sauce looking. And I'd say that for my dog, again, I varied a little bit. Like I know we've got squeeze bottles. They're classic 1 liter squeeze bottle. I'd say on a light day, it might be a tablespoon a liter. On a bigger day, it might be up to 2 or 3 tablespoons per liter. And that's just me a little bit when I kind of think about temperatures, how hot he's running, what I want to give him. And that's, I think, the fun thing with our product. It comes out so concentrated. You can use it as is, as a drizzle, and some people do that just on their kibble. But diluting it with water, you get to dial up and dial down how much dilution, how much extra water you want to be giving to your
Yeah.
dog.
And I can say, the product you sent me, I kind of used it in a number of different ways. I kind of wanted to see how the dogs reacted to it being used as a drizzle or diluting it in water or just putting it in water without kibble. And they loved it anyway. I mean, either way you did it, it was just fine. And it did last. I mean, one bottle, I think, lasted all three of my dogs for a month. And I mean, I have 35-pound dogs, 35 to 40 pounds. So they're not your typical, German 60, 70-pound German short hair pointer by any means. But one bottle lasted me a month. And, to me, that was pretty acceptable. It's pretty affordable when you start looking at the price and stuff like that. I'm curious, again, I have a million questions, but there's really no way to answer some of them until you get the opportunity to get some of the reports or studies back, right? So, maybe eventually whenever those come down, maybe we circle
Oh, I'd
back
love
and
to.
do that. But just from the anecdotal response from, you just sending product to myself or previous customers, what have you, what are some of the more common responses you're getting from people? Like, not the one-offs that like, there's no way of knowing if that was really the product or not, but is there kind of a common theme that you're hearing from everybody across the board that you can be like, all right, if this is a coincidence, it's a pretty strong coincidence?
Yeah. I'd say, and it's been so this hunting season, across the board, I'd say that the number one feedback that we've gotten from breeders, trainers, and again, just your audience, just the hunters, right? Like me with their 1 to 3 dogs, has been really like how the I'd say like muscle structure or weight of that dog was maintained through the season. And I think I might have mentioned this to you before. I had I stopped counting, but a lot of people just kept on using the same analogy, and when they didn't know each other, right? So, folks from the Midwest to the Rockies, all the way to, I've got a pot of people using my product in Thomasville, Georgia. And so, and how they talk about it was simply like, hey, I know how many ribs I typically see, which is acceptable to me, like as the pet parent at the end of the season for my dog, just like how hard they were pushing themselves and trying to keep weight on them where it is a struggle, but then, again, keeping them as healthy as possible, making it through the season where I don't feel that they are at risk. And they typically would say, like, the best way to now, explain it to you, Kevin, like if by the end of the season, I might see that outline of that third to almost fourth rib, it's stalling out at number one to number two.
Mm.
And so and I heard that over and over again. And so, which makes sense again, like the protein hits, the amino acid hits that are saying, hey, focus on muscle synthesis, get them triggered to kind of keep rebuilding after they've been stressed, as well as on mobility. So hip and joints cartilage. That was the biggest feedback that I got from the community that were really driving active dogs. And with that, there's a few groups that got some sneak peek of our product that we just launched in Q1 of this year, right at Pheasant Fest, when and we had a chance to get introduced. And so we have our beef flavor, we've got our chicken flavor, and then we launched this mobility flavor, really from folks that were working with active performance dogs, to saying, hey, I think we're seeing this. Is there any chance that you could even super boost it? And again, I have this big brother that was a partner, helping me with the R&D, and they were able to say, hey, like, we can take these, handful of amino acids that really tell your system to focus on muscle and mobility issues, and we can accentuate those. And so we have got this beef-based mobility formula that's boosted with some amino acids that target, again, just this mobility kind of framework. And then we added some glucosamine as well, and that product did amazingly well for us. I think with your community, and I think that's what I'm most excited about as we go into the fall again this year. Also, with some of that testing, fingers crossed that we're able to get to happen up in Alaska, is just really to see what it's doing when dogs are stressed. And I don't mean that in a negative way. Stress performance acting over periods of time. Again, having this as a supplement, not replacing what's happening at mealtime, but having it as a supplement, seeing how it's helping them kind of keep up further, longer during the season.
Yeah. If somebody's listening to this and they want to give this a shot, what's your first off? Where do they go to find it? You have a website. I know. I think you said you're on Amazon, but I'll let you direct people where. But is there a general, like, would you suggest trying it out for 30 days, 60 days, 90 days, get it in a routine? Because, this is one of those products, like, I think if you just use it for 2 days and you're like, I didn't see any difference, you kind of have to give it some time to test, flush out. What would you kind of advise somebody who might be interested in trying this out for their dogs? What's the best way of going about doing that?
Yeah. So real quickly, for access to product, and you nailed it. I mean, we do have a website, which is Furvor, and Furvor is a play on the word. We have Furvor for Furvor. So Furvor is spelled F-U-R, not F-E-R. So furvorpet.com. Amazon is where all our growth has been, which has been just a crazy blur for us. But we launch, and then 12 to 15 months later, we're the number two most sold bone broth on Amazon. So we definitely have a presence, and you'll be able to find our full product set there. For those that are living in the Midwest, we also just opened a trial in California, up in Tahoe, Chandler, Arizona, the Meridian, Idaho, which is near Boise. But most of our locations are Midwest. We have about a 7-store trial right now with Shields. They've been a fantastic partner for us. And so you can also find it online at Shields, as well as in a handful of stores. And if you go into their website, they'll let you know what stores have it, right? If it's near your zip code, you can type that in. And so that'd be another way just to kind of get your hands on it for folks that are in that community. So real quickly, and this is kind of fun, like for the dogs that are, we have a large constituency who actually don't have performance dogs, right? And so it's always funny, but across the board, what everyone will see is within 2 weeks, I think if you're dosing it the right way, you're going to see something different in your dog's skin and coat. I think even before you start seeing muscle mobility issues starting to benefit or to change. If you have an older dog and maybe has that hitch in the gait, and so that's I think what captivates everyone's like attention first, which is like those amino acids hitting skin and coat issues. Everyone doesn't know it. Like, hey, I don't know if it's a luster. I don't know what just happened, but my dog's skin and coat looks different. And so we hear that really quickly. But to your point, and generally what we've been told by our partner for performance dogs and seeing the benefit, like really do that 30-day trial, do the 30-day test. Um, and why I'd say for community, for anyone, like it's risk-free. It's 100% satisfaction. If you don't like it, it's easier to return to me if you buy it from my website than Amazon. Amazon always makes you jump through a few hoops, but it's also, you'll get your 100% guarantee there as well. But it's a free trial. Try it for 30 days. If you don't see a benefit, if you felt that, 85 cents a serving for 30 days wasn't worth checking it out, just all you do is you email me and I refund your money the next day. I believe enough in the product that my view is you're going to see the additive benefit, and whether that's the daily regimen during the season, or if you feel like it's the every third day, or if it's just for the aggressive long weekend, I think you're going to see a difference when you're using it, creating a routine with your dogs. And so generally what we've heard, especially with the performance active dog community, you need that 30 days to start seeing it, because you know your dog better than anyone. And whether it's an energy level in the field, like just ready to go, right? Whether it's that mobility or just right, more muscle, more fat, around the rib cage area, it's going to take a while to see how it's manifesting. And again, randomly, I'll get the call. Like one of my favorite guides in Thomasville right now, Gary Griffin. Griff, if you listen to this, hello. Like he used it for a couple of days with his cockers down in Thomasville. He's just like, it's like they're on crack. He's like, I don't know. He's like, normally the cockers are on crack already, but like they're really on crack. And he was just a week into it, and he's been guiding his whole life down there. Knows more about hunting birds than I ever will in my life. Yeah. But to hear folks like that give me a call and just like they're just watching their pups, right? And
Well,
seeing how
my older girl Rachel, she was really the only one that I saw any kind of visible difference in her behavior, and I sent you a couple videos of it after a couple weeks of using it, and again, no idea if this is what caused it or whatnot, but it's kind of gone back to normal since I haven't had any more of the product. So strong indication that it was this. But she's over 10 going on 11, whatever age she is. I'm horrible about keeping track of that, but she's over 10 and she hasn't really quote unquote played with the other dogs in quite some time. Not to a point to where you really notice it. She might just like for 5 seconds get entertained with it. But after 2 weeks on Furvor, that's the only thing that we changed in her routine and regiment, was adding it to the food. She was essentially having a Royal Rumble with Quinn, my setter pup, every night. I mean, every night for the remainder of the bottle, and then it kind of tapered back off, and she's back to normal. So whether she had a random just giddy up, for 2 weeks and felt a little bit more energetic all on her own, or it was the bone broth, I did notice a little bit more energy and enthusiasm and just willingness, just wanting to play with the other dogs. And so, take that for whatever it's worth. Obviously, there's no data behind that, but I did notice that. And the other two, I didn't really notice any physical changes in their demeanor, but they're also a little bit younger and they're plenty active anyway. But they loved the taste of it, and they ate it right up. So, I didn't see any negatives, no gas, no diarrhea, none of that stuff. So for anybody listening, take that for whatever it's worth to each of you.
Love it. Always love the feedback, as you know. Yeah. And again, I know I can't bat 1,000. So yeah, any feedback is good feedback, especially with this community that I know gets their dogs.
Right. Well, Kevin, as we kind of wrap this one up, what I like to do on these episodes is I like to throw it to the guests at the very end and just ask, is there something I should have asked you or we should have talked about that we didn't?
No, listen, it was a pleasure. And I know jokingly, I'm, 18 months in this journey. I am new to the podcast world as well. I can't thank you enough for making it easy and just letting me share the story. And as you know, we've talked on and off now the last few months. I haven't had this much fun in a long time, Nick. And so I believe in this product. If this idea can just make a little difference in the pet nutrition industry, and if it can make, hopefully a little bit bigger difference for dog owners that are, really kind of pushing active dogs in a lot of different ways. It's so cool to wake up every day feeling that. And so like being able to have my voice, with a little bit more of a megaphone working with folks like you, I can't thank you enough for the opportunity just to chat with you today.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm glad we finally did it. And anybody that liked what they heard or they're curious and they want to try it out, check the show notes for the links down below that we discuss. And there may or may not be a little promo code there for you to help you get going.
I think there may be one.
Maybe. So check the show notes out. If you do try it and you do get a good response or notice it, even if you don't notice it, give Kevin the feedback as he kind of gets going. Good. And Kevin, I would like to circle back, especially once you kind of get some of those research studies and stuff in hand, and maybe we can kind of go even deeper on some of the questions or stuff down the road, because stuff like this, it really intrigues me as to the benefits and what we can actually really track.
I love it. Hey, thanks again. Thanks for the time today.
Perfect.